Hello, Kyle.
Hello.
I'm a bit early, but hey, Alex. Wow, you look more comfortable than ever.
About like consistent styling.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh well, choose my winter.
I am going to leave the recording on.
Sorry. AV check.
Pretty good.
Okay, great.
But I'm going to leave the recording on for now. I learned my lesson. The tag meeting this week, I stopped it for this like initial pre-chat, and then I forgot to turn it back on.
I saw that. I think you're still a hero in my book, Josh. Don't worry.
Yeah, it was nice to get a supportive comment because I felt so stupid. I'm like signing off, and it's like, I'm like, wait a second, something's missing here.
It acts as like a barrier for your secrets with all the
We do kind of hear, is that from Ram Kumar or is that from you, Alex? I do kind of hear.
It might be from me. Sorry, I'll mute.
Will you be okay to lead, Alex?
Yeah, yeah. We're just finishing up from another meeting, and then we'll.
Sweet.
All right. I told these heathens to quiet themselves. We're ready to start.
If you want to give it another minute or two, I know Steve said he was going to join, right?
Yeah, I was actually just talking to him on Slack. I hope so.
I tend to like start at like 3 or 4 minutes. Everyone's always
Yeah.
late to. By the way, speaking of folks, Justin Cormack, Steve's boss, I guess at this point, he's our liaison to the talk for the tag, and so I've been pinging him. Like I think his review of the charter is really key, and he did say I think he's gonna try to join here, but he'd be a bit late.
Oh, good. Okay. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Steve.
Hey guys. Try to get a sense of your background there, Alex.
I'm on a road trip right now, so I've actually come to a co-working office with some of my fellow Red Hatters. So we've been having collaborative sessions today.
Gotcha.
Okay. I'm gonna wait one more minute. I think we already have pretty good attendance, but I just wanted to. I know if anybody's like me or the other people, it's like you need a couple minutes after your last meeting. So.
Pulling up the docs. We have an agenda for today.
We do. Yeah, I'm grabbing it from the Slack channel right now. I'll post it in the comments here.
Perfect.
I hope that's the right one.
Yep. Yeah, you had a different doc you were doing for the user stories, which I think was linked in here as well.
That's right. Yeah, and I started those. I could talk about them later, and I think that we should still be Ram's idea about gathering the user issues was also, I think, maybe more important than those, but it's just something I was starting, so they're not prescriptive.
Fair enough.
Okay, I think we are 4 minutes over. I'm going to start if that's okay with everyone. First of all, I think we have a couple new attendees here, and I wanted to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. If this is your first time joining and you're comfortable saying hi to everyone, we'd love to hear who you are and your use case for artifacts and the work that you engage in.
Right, I'll go first. This is Ravi Chamarti. Unfortunately, I'm not able to switch on my video yet. I'm from Cisco Systems. I work specifically from the artifacts point of view. I'm one of the maintainers for ZOT project, which is a container registry that we use here at Cisco, as well as open sourced and is a CNCF sandbox project. My interest in artifacts is to apply the artifacts techniques against our appliance operating systems we're building along with ZOT.
I think you got a couple big ZOT fans here, so welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, can I go next? Hello everyone. I'm Dipesha. I'm from India. I'm currently a student. I'm pursuing a bachelor's in computer science. I'm an LFX mentee under the ORIS project. So I'm restructuring the entire documentation. So I joined the channel recently because it was relevant to the ORIS project. But I thought, as I'm new to it, I thought I would join a few meetings, learn a bit, and explore artifacts in general. So yeah, that's why I've joined.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. I think some of our earliest collaborations around artifacts was started through ORIS, so it seems like you're in the right place. Great. Well, it's great to have you guys. Have you all. Let's see here. Yeah, I saw Kyle posted some feedback on the PR today, the charter PR. That's pull 409 on the tag app delivery repo. Also in the meeting notes here. And then Steve also had some input there, and I'm glad that Brandon showed up also, because I think that your feedback is related to each other. So I guess real quick before we go into OCI artifacts reference in the PR, I wanted to hit Kyle's feedback specifically about having stretch goals, and then where those would be appropriate. He had suggested that we have additional references to search within the activities section, and that sounded like a good approach to me. So I was just wanted to give him an opportunity to maybe socialize that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of two parts to this problem the way I see it. There's the storage of artifacts and what the data model looks like, whether it's a common data model or not. There's debate over that, but whether a common data model is even achievable or what that even looks like, right? But there's the storage part, and then there's the search discovery part. And I think there's also two audiences for the search discovery part. There's the user, like a human, and then there's the package manager who would want to do like structured search on packages to figure out relations. What I have, imagine I'm pip, and I'm pip version awesome, right? And I want to use OCI to pull my packages. What do I have to do to figure out what versions of this package are available? And based on search criteria such as compatible with my architecture or whatever it may be. I don't know. So I think we lay out NPM and we call out, PyPy, we call out Maven. I think it might make sense to clarify some of that language in there in terms of possibly stretch goals, or maybe the activities can be thought of as stretch goals, or they're different things. I mean, activities are just things we want to kind of do. I think having those under some type of stretch goals or something might make sense.
One of a question, and I'm not sure it's relevant to this conversation, but I found it interesting that you differentiated user interactions with search and machine interactions with search. And I understand the machine use case. I'm a little bit less, I understand the user interactions a little bit less. And I didn't know if those were relevant to populating the information that you're describing, or if that's something that we would identify later.
I think it's less important than the machine interactions to search.
Okay.
I don't think the goal here is Google for OCI artifacts, but at some point in time, humans tend to want to discover data.
So
and they can use structured search to do that, but sometimes you want to do more than that. Like there's description fields that have paragraphs of just human readable description of what this thing is. You might want to use free text search over those types of fields and that's a human thing. A machine would never really want to do that.
Do we want, and this is kind of for the group then and to you, Kyle, but do we want to address that abstraction within this working group, or is that something that would be an abstraction on the output of this working group?
Is it a scoping question, I think is what you're asking? Because I think at this point, we're just trying to get the charter up, finalized so that we can get into the meat of what you're getting at, Kyle, right? It's I hear this is some of the use cases. So is there something about the scope of the charter that we need to address to get into the fun part of those conversations?
I just want to make sure the scope of the charter is large enough that it encompasses that discussion. Gotcha. I guess is probably my selfish perspective on it.
I would agree. Yes. I don't know if it precludes that. I'd have to reread it with that lens, but that's the lens I've been reading it, that we would have those conversations. I've always thought of it as kind of a multi-level one, just list the tags and that kind of stuff in the repos because we got rid of the catalog API. Then there's common information that's available, which is part of the tag listing, but the annotations or architecture or other things, maybe media types. And then we get into content specific. And that's the one where either registries have to opt into what they index, or this is where I'm really interested in the ideas Alex has been poking on, where there might be some way to do something to do around comma schema that all registries could implement that don't need to know about a specific type. But if I'm pushing a foo object, I would know how to populate that so the common would be able to scan it. So I kind of, that's why I'm just trying to frame it, not get into the details, but that's how I've been thinking about it so that we can get into the use cases to figure out, is there a way to do it? How do we do it in such a way that every registry doesn't have to chase content indexing? That's the way I've been thinking about the scoping. And then we go back to the use cases and figure out, can we land on something that actually is generically used, generically implementable?
Well, are we defining, I think this goes back to a couple discussions ago then, does this have to be something in a registry, or are we saying that we're actually populating a separate indexing service for this? And then I think that might drive the decision in this scoping question.
So the way the way I've been thinking about it is the registry is a store with APIs. But if you look at the specs don't dictate what implementation the stores need to be done, whether it's S3 or blobs from Azure or a file back system, right? The client issues URIs that can be pulled. How they're indexed, because every registry does various true indexing, not the in OCI index, but like has some kind of databasing indexing system to query and find content. What each cloud provider or registry uses, that's completely up to them. So my thought has always been that there's an API on the registry endpoint that we define a schema for that API, a signature. So that's what I was looking for, a signature with a schema for their payloads. And then whatever the registry wants to implement to support that, party on, as long as it replies back. Because there'll be some that are super fast because they have to work over terabytes or petabytes of data. And they would use something very different than something I might implement in an IoT environment that, runs in a container on a local file system. So we can just come up with those APIs, then we're kind of done, is the thought process.
Because I'm almost wondering if the solution looks like an announce to this API, right? You're pushing the content into OCI or IPFS or whatever it is, and then you're just sending an announce saying this content address has this context or something like that. So I guess
Now we're
And
getting,
I-
That's similar to the
fun
architecture
part.
I use right now.
Yeah.
So I have a secondary service that the client pushes to 2 places. It pushes the data and the metadata to the registry, and then the other data, the metadata, and not the actual data, goes to a service that does all the indexing and deals with both, whether it's structured search or unstructured search. Both are handled by outside. I'm not claiming that's a good way of doing it. That was just the way I had the means of doing it, because I didn't have extension APIs and things of that nature. I didn't want to mess with registries.
I would take a look at some of the lessons learned from the original version of Notary, because that was kind of the approach they were taking there, where they were having an external server being the signature store over there. And they ran into a lot of issues with that in terms of you copy your image or your artifact from one registry to another, and now all the pointers are still pointing to the old registry.
Oh yeah, I'm not thinking about it from that perspective. Like signatures, they go in OCI, but my point is we would put them in both.
But once you separate the artifact from metadata about the artifact, you're reproducing the same issues they ran into, is what I'm getting at. And so you're
Kyle, what
running
he's
the
kind of
issue.
referring, sorry.
Go ahead, Steve.
It's what I was kind of saying. There's a way, if you can create the index that doesn't duplicate the content, that's the heart of what I think Brandon's getting at, because there's a shitload of storage. Sorry, there's a lot of terabytes and petabytes in stores and registries to begin with. I don't think anybody wants to duplicate. In fact, we spend time to dedupe them. So I think it's just,
Right.
That's why the various indexing systems of these, that's why I wouldn't use another database. I would use another indexing solution. So that you're not copying the data. So to your point, an event gets fired, but the listener of that event isn't copying the content over. It's going like, oh, that's interesting. What should I pull out of it to put in my index? And by the way, if the index gets corrupted, it can go get regenerated.
Right.
You start hitting portability concerns. You start moving content around, but your index isn't getting copied around. There are a lot of challenges like that. And so if you keep it all in one place, just on the registry, that's nicer for us.
Yeah.
Just playing not just time cop, but scope cop on the conversation. Can we, I'd love to just figure out, can we get the charter merged? So then we can get into because all these are fun conversations, but it's like, we got to get past go.
So
I think it relates to that. Awesome.
Yeah, I have
Sorry, go
some-
ahead, Josh.
If it's okay, Alex, I'll just share. I did I brought it up in the meeting, and I'm trying to bring people's attention to it. I could do a little bit more, and I will. There's a lot going on. But I did reach out to Justin in particular, who is the tag. I think he's the one that needs to give if he signs off, then I think we're good.
Justin
Cormac. So Steve.
Oh, that's why he's pinging me. He just pinged me like, are you joining the meeting? I'm like, yeah, why? It's like, okay. Now,
Exactly.
you connected the context for me.
Yeah, sorry about that. I mentioned it before you joined that. I'd had a little chat with him on the side, and I asked him to come because I think if he signs off and he says in the talk, thing that, yeah, this looks good, then I think we're ready to, merge or, finalize the PR.
I just want to say though, I do want to be sensitive to an implicit reference to the search capability in the charter, and vice an explicit reference to the search capability that Kyle's bringing up, because I do think that's relevant, and I don't know if we have an implicit assumption that that's in there, if that comes back to bite us in the ass when we when we talk about the project scope when we're actually doing this. So I just wanted to be sensitive to his concern before we, you know, and so I just want to be precise before we move on to that. Okay.
I
And
feel
I
like
want to make
Justin's
sure.
comment is looping all this together though, where
Okay.
if we looking at what he says, just looking at the notes there, I feel like that's answering the question of how far do we make the scope? How do we get the charter moving forward and all these other discussions we're having?
If we're good with how it is and the group is comfortable that that's within the scope, that his concern is within the scope of what we already have in the charter, then I'd like to move on. And then
Yeah, 'cause
I
what-
think there are, okay, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, what I was looking at the notes, the feedback from Justin that Josh was getting ready to say there was that he wanted to see this more in the context of a user story in terms of those things. And so just to put this in the perspective of what users are expecting to get out of this group. And so that might get into, okay, we need to frame your comment about search as a user story, frame some of these other requirements as a user story, just to say this what from a user looking at this from an external that hadn't been part of all these discussions, what are they going to get out of this working group?
Okay. I put in the agenda a part about user stories. I don't know if we want to go into that then, if that becomes a dual purpose topic. I see Ram has his hand up, but then there's also the Steve and Brandon, you both took exception to the reference to the artifact or image specification within the charter. That I think that also needs to be clarified. So those I think are the maybe Ram can.
All right, Ram. Oh, Ram's got his hand raised. Go ahead, Ram.
Yeah, so the question I had is this work, the scope of this work is, are we coupling very tightly to a registry, or are we saying that this is independent of a registry? So for example, will an NPM package repository implement whatever this contract versus an OCA registry implementing this contract, and so on and so forth? So, so is the coupling strong or is it weak?
I think it's an awesome question. I think this is kind of why we were thinking about it from an artifacts perspective. Is artifacts are stored in lots of registries, lots of different package managers at this point. The main effort around the OCI artifacts effort was, this came from running registries in Azure and being asked to run additional registry services, package managers, and the cost in doing so is just prohibitive. Impractical. So the thought was, can we please stop creating new package managers, because we seem to have one that's very well funded across the cloud providers. Can we leverage that? Because I don't know too many people that really want to create new package managers. Every once in a while somebody gets excited about it, but there's a lot of people that want to create artifacts that need to be distributed, and they get blocked because they don't have a package manager. So there's an interesting problem of, can we stop creating new? And then if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So then the question is, what do we do around the existing ones? So there's a bunch of people would argue that some are broke and they would like to be fixed and so forth. So the balance to that thought process was simply, can we create these APIs that we just discussed and that hang them on a registry, but hang them on NPM, on RPM, and all these other package managers as well, so that clients can consistently query across those. If that's realistic or not, I don't know. But start with the idea and let's prove it can't be done. And that was one of the reasons why we did it here and not just under OCI as well.
Thanks, Steve. Okay.
Great question.
Did you have any feedback, Ram, based on that, or did you just trying to understand if that's something is actionable here, or if that is just a question?
No, I'm just looking into the future, right? So what paths this work can take. So it is possible that everything converges around a registry concept. And then this is one of the features that gets added there, or the existing package managers, the NPMs, RPMs, all of them retrofit this particular, they implement this one, and clients can talk to any one of those. So I'm not sure which path this work will take. So just speculating. So
Well, I think it's part of inviting the additional communities, right? Including the new ones, whether it be Roger or the stuff he's doing with QLang or the existing various package managers. So again, why we've done it here is to have a more inclusive group of the breadth of package managers, registries, whatever people want to call them.
And I think that was our first activity that was the gathering those schemas as well. And I think that'll be helpful in understanding the path there
I
too.
see. Yeah. So it wasn't just the schemas of the people putting OCI artifacts in, it's the people that have schemas for various package managers.
I think it would be helpful to have that information.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I see now. Cool.
Okay, so are we gonna make a reference to the OCI artifacts guidance, or are we gonna make a reference within the charter to the data model? I think that's the next question for Steve and Brandon to if anybody has any input there. That's the one piece of input that I don't have a clear path to deliberating on.
Got to resolve that one.
Yeah, if we're making a data model for the manifest, then I think it might be best to delegate or collaborate with OCI on that side. If we're talking about a data model for contents within it, the blobs and whatnot, and other structures inside of your artifact, then yeah, if you want to work on that over here, that sounds great.
I think it's a different question. I think that was the question of whether the working group is under OCI or under here. So because we're spanning multiples and we wanted to have a more involved group, that's why the group was done under CNCF tag. The question that Alex is asking is which reference do we make to the image spec or the OCI artifact spec? Because both of them there, what might happen in the future is not done yet. And while there's technical details on how the specification details are in the image and distribution, there's nothing that bridges them well together. There's no doc that actually explains how to use them. So right now that's in OCI artifacts. I know there's a bunch of conversations there. It's not something that gets solved in a PR. That's a TOB vote. And I just don't think we need to worry. Like this is not the only place that has made a reference to that repo. So I don't think we need to worry about that right now.
I suspect at some point it's going to get archived and may not be too long after the 1.1 release. We'll see whenever we get an image spec release there happening. But that is still future looking. And like Steve says, that'll be TOB vote and artifact maintainer discussion, stuff like that. There's going to be a lot of that happening over on the OCI side. So
I just wouldn't predate that decision. So that's why I'm saying just if we keep it to where it was, this is, first of all, the extreme is to archive it, it's not getting deleted. So that link is not going to be a dead link. I'm not sure it needs to be archived. So that's this other discussion that we could have. So it's not either way, it's not a bad link. And it is the tree that points to the various specs and the various implementations and describes how to use this.
The risk that I see and still point to that repo though, is that we have moved image spec away from some of the stuff that's been described in the artifact repo. We've added the artifact type, we've started adding all the refers, things like that. And so some of those changes we've added to image spec haven't moved back over there. And so now we've got two different definitions in two different places. And so if people are looking for where we're going, image spec might be the better one to look at, but we're getting into OCI drama and I don't know how much we want to get in that here.
Exactly.
But I'm trying to figure out the best way we can put that reference without getting into that drama.
I don't know if there's Okay.
Because what you're talking about is the stability point, right? Like, I know we're about to release an RC4. We released an RC3. So it's just, I think everybody is kind of waiting for OCI to figure out how they're going to handle stability. So until that point, we have a stable pointer, and we can, if and when it changes, we can worry about it then.
Okay, right now in the PR, I pushed it. I'm pointing to the image spec. And so I just need concurrence from this group. I think with the attendees here, that'd be sufficient in determining which one we want to point to. If I don't know how if a show of hands is the right way to make that determination or what, but
Let's just state an opinion. I think we said it's okay to reference that doc for now. Let's not worry about it. Does anybody disagree?
The artifacts one?
We kind of have
Kind
fine.
of like Alex was saying, image spec, and I was going to give a thumbs up to image spec. So welcome to the drama of OCI. It spreads everywhere.
yep. Yeah. That was my feedback to Steve this morning, is I don't want to do artifacts drama, but here we are. Okay. Brandon, I think you're the only one who's taken exception with that thus far. So if you don't mind, I would revert back to the artifacts until we get there.
It's not a hard exception. I was just trying to avoid having people get confused and they look at places and they see two different things, but not a hard exception. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we can just say artifact spec hasn't been archived yet, and if it is, then we can repoint. All right, I will make that change. And I apologize for my forced pushes. I think I clobbered Kyle's one of his comments, but just an easier way to avoid having to squash everything at the end. So
That's fine. I mean, is there any opposition to referencing both of them? Like, you're talking about line 26, I presume, right? Gather existing schemas used, set artifacts as described in image spec and artifact, right? Like, we could just reference both of them, and I can see Brandon's argument for referencing artifact spec there and not the image spec, because the image spec does talk about artifacts now.
But the artifact spec points to the image spec. So it's not,
Oh, okay.
that is the point. It bridges to, because it's not just in the image spec, it's also in the distribution spec. So
Yeah,
do
that's
you
true. That's
cover
true.
Artifacts, image, distribution, or do you use the artifacts one that is the tree that goes to both?
Okay.
That's why that repo was created in the first place.
And that's
for-
a better argument than before for using artifacts there then.
For anyone missing some of the context, I'm a maintainer on image spec. Steve is a maintainer on artifact spec. And so all the fun there.
okay.
We have Justin, just wanted to point out, Alex, so.
Yeah, so I'm gonna revert to artifacts. I'm just gonna leave it how we had it to begin with. But I'm sensitive to Brandon's with the point he brings up. So I think that's something we need to continue keeping a thumb on. Justin, I haven't been able
to hand off, so I'm gonna do a baton toss to Justin, although we haven't really talked, but he could ping me if he needs to, because I got to.
Oh yeah, because you've got a call now. Yes, yes. Because I was just talking to Jim, who's also on that call. Yeah.
Thanks, folks.
That's Steve. Justin, I haven't had a chance to review your feedback on the PR yet. We actually had a agenda item talking about user stories here, so I think maybe it's in vogue with your feedback.
I think definitely. I just felt that the way it was phrased was kind of not necessarily very clear to people who were, external to the world of what this is. Yeah, and having a more kind of user what kind of user stories we're going to enable would be helpful for people to understand what's going on and why about this, because I think people who are in the seekers to understand it, but part of this is to help people from outside understand why this stuff is actually useful for them, and I think a lot of people are not necessarily exactly clear.
So your recommendation is that within our goals that each of those points be addressed from the perspective of a user story then? Would that
something along those lines? Yeah, that would something along those lines. Yeah, I mean, I mean, I don't mind exactly just as long, but I think that would something that's more user focused rather than outcome, like kind of, yeah, a bit more why would be helpful.
Great.
But
Okay.
exactly what form it's in, I don't mind.
Okay. So do we want to jump back into the goals then, to have this session go back into the goals, and then maybe I already have some user stories. I don't know if we want to try to match them together, or maybe Josh, you could give some guidance here.
Yeah, I wanted to, so there are kind of two things. I really like what Justin's suggestion is. It kind of reminds me of this discussion we had a couple of weeks ago about whether to include problem statements in there. So I think but I think that's exactly what we need to know from you, Justin. Should we be including the user stories in here? And if you feel we should be, then we will. Which kind of leads into my second thing. Like, Justin, I feel like you're the person that needs to sign off. Like, there's not a ton of people in the talk chiming in on that thread. So what more do you recommend we do? What questions might remain? Do we need to surface this to other people in the talk? Like, what's the next? We're pretty close to ready to go.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. It's pretty close to ready to go. I think that I don't think it's in general, these are supposed to be quite lightweight, so I don't think there's any problem. So I think that, I think if we just maybe just clarify the user stories a bit, we could just go ahead and do it and put it up for I think it just has to go for a vote, but it should be very straightforward.
I would say an advantage of Justin's approach of saying what or why you want to do it rather than how you want to do it is it gives you flexibility if you realize that how we thought we could do it isn't how we're going to be able to do it.
I was talking to Steve Lasker about this earlier this week, and it creates an XY problem. I think we get to avoid if we go with the user story approach. And I agree there too.
We could include them as an appendix, maybe. Because I see the Ouija charters coming through, and some of them are heavily emphasizing problem statements at the start, and some of them are not, which also. But maybe we can have the problem statements like as a section at the end to satisfy both. Or user stories.
Okay. So do our current goals pigeonhole us into specific solutions that we need to be cautious of? Do we want to scrap the goals we have and then tailor those as questions then, or do we want to keep the goals we have and then add clarification of the problems and stories as an appendix?
We have lines in there saying seek to minimize or avoid specification changes, and who knows if we get into this and we realize we need to modify a spec. So there are things in there we're saying that we're going to do it in a certain way that we might run into later on down the road.
Okay. So just to clarify then, we're saying scrap the goals, however, take the nature of those entries and then format them as questions.
I think some of the different. Yeah, I think that the seek to minimize one, I would definitely agree with Brandon that taking it out makes sense. But I think that the gather existing schema is like that's a perfectly good goal. We can that's information collecting and framing and working out state of the art, which is fine. I think that the contribute to a common data model, I think that one needs that one should have more of an outcome, because it's not, the why on that is not clear to someone from outside. And yeah, again, as Brandon said, there's going to be more than one. Do we understand the problem enough to know that that's the answer right now? One, or maybe there's two, or maybe there's lots. Or maybe we find some patterns and things. So I think maybe that one needs to be turned into a more of an outcome. specification change we talked about, defining a query API and publishing implementation, again, those two felt to me like we have a problem in mind, but we haven't written down what the problem we're trying to solve is exactly. And again, just saying what's the thing we're trying to help people find would be more helpful there than just doing that, I think.
It feels like what we're trying to say here is determine a way that we can store all of this arbitrary content and then figure out a way that we can query all this arbitrary content now that we're storing it there. And so those are kind of
the query has more about that because we're assuming some kind of way in which people are trying to find things that is kind of fuzzy in my mind. Like, in what ways is this different from Artifact Hub? One could perfectly reasonably ask. And I'm not sure that we're answering that question, for example. Is it enabling every registry to be an Artifact Hub in a useful way for users, or, for example, and or are we actually enabling something else?
That's
Sorry,
kind
I'm
of
just trying to, yeah.
I'm just talking into the silence. It's kind of another iteration on the doc, right? To kind of I'm kind of hearing goals combined with the stories somehow, like give a little more motivation and context for the goals.
I think it can be quite lightweight, though. I don't think we have to like spend a lot of time doing this because I think we can do that as part of the actual work and not upfront. Because I think we should just try and get this done.
I want to.
Soon.
I'm trying to make sure that I'm receiving your feedback in a way that's helpful. Excuse me. I'm looking at the goals, and I'm wondering if they're specifically I'm looking at the goals, and I'm wondering if specifically the ones that you brought up, if we can just format those as questions or as stories, or if that would satisfy the ask here. So like I think it was specifically around the remove the seek to minimize or avoid specifications. I think that one, correct me if I'm wrong, needs to go. And then for the remaining three under gather existing schemas, we can write user stories that address those. And is that the clarification you're asking for, or?
Yeah, that'd be absolutely fine. I think the last two you could. I mean, the last two are this kind of the outcome of them is effectively the same thing. So that we could just have one story for both of them because it's just a question of like deciding that that's just two parts of it, two parts of the outcome of the work in order to reach the outcome.
Yeah. Okay. 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 So, Josh, I don't know if you had a chance, or if anybody here had a chance to read the user stories that I proposed or that I submitted that we could go over. They're here in the meeting notes. I don't know if those maybe give us a start in formatting the these goals, or if those are maybe too specific for what we're talking about. But if is anybody, I need to get into the story now.
Sorry, where are they in the?
Here, I'll provide a direct link here in the comments. I didn't know if these give us a start or if we wanted to go a different direction. And I'm only saying that because it just gives us base content. So that's all I was trying to bring up.
I'm a tiny bit thrown off by the namespace bit, I think, but I think
That was two. Can we dig into what you're going with there? Very first label artifacts, we're saying as a user, want to be able to discover information about artifacts across namespaces.
Yeah. So like when we talk about the refers API and that functionality, it's I forget if I'm wrong on this or if I'm remembering this
It's
correctly.
repository scoped.
Okay, so for example, if there's a package published to a namespace that I don't have write access to, but I wanted to make a reference to that, I would want to be able to discover that reference across namespace from my repository, from my publication in reference to that other namespace. That was the basis of that.
It's an interesting goal that is probably going to come back and bite us later on. So
I
be aware.
I would say these are too detailed for the charter. I think they're a useful thing as a potential output of the working group is to say these things, but I think this is more detail than the charter needs for the.
I would take these though and build on them and then use these to simplify down to what the charter needs to have in it. So this just gives us our brainstorming so we don't lose anything.
I did copy in here, Alex. I guess see what you think of them. Some of the problem statements that we had in the charter before I put them down at the bottom. Maybe this also like between the ones that you have at the top, and maybe these are a little more general, but also a little bit verbose. Maybe there's some ideas there. Put in the heading.
Yeah, and I wrote that user
Sorry,
story.
where did you put? Sorry, I can't find anything today. What?
Same doc. If you scroll down, original. I'll put a heading right there.
Oh, sorry. Okay, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay,
I added
so
one about as a developer, blah blah blah, to capture
wonderful.
that use case that we were talking about earlier today.
Okay, so I think we have 12 minutes here. I'd like to maybe define or start defining something that would go into the charter that would be the thing that Justin's proposing or based on his feedback. And so, and what the scope of that thing would be. And I think based on what Brandon said, that might be a superset of something larger than these user stories, the granularity that these current user stories go into. With our remaining time, if we could just kind of provision a space somewhere in the meeting notes where we can just kind of start that blurb, I can add that to the PR, and then we can go over it in the next session, or we can go over it asynchronously up until the next session. So if somebody could give me a prompt, in the meeting notes, or I guess that what I'm asking for is from this session with the remaining time we have, just give me a prompt and I can churn on that and then get that to the Slack channel or into the PR.
If I'm quiet, it's not because I'm ignoring you. I'm actually going through and doing a little quick PR on the chart document right now. So I'll give you some feedback on that in a minute.
Great, thanks.
I'm not totally clear what I think this artifact user stories that you've started here, Alex, these are great, and we should they might not be exactly from the charter, but they're a good place for us to talk and iterate on. Is your ask now for what to? I didn't completely understand the ask.
For the goals, based on Justin's feedback, just making sure that we're getting that information into the goals in a way that's communicates what we're doing to somebody who's not initiated into this effort. And so I'm just asking for kind of like a prompt, maybe with this last 10 minutes, where maybe I could just get something to start on that would be what Justin's asking for.
I think I would think something along the lines of I think what I was thinking is like so the gather existing schemas is understand how people are using OCI and artifacts now, understand the scope of the set of problems that people are interested in solving, kind of map and generalize those problems and the existing things and the things that people want to do onto into a set of models into a useful set of models, and then work out a set of tools that work on a set of tools that people will need to in order to efficiently utilize those to solve those problems they came up with. Something kind of as generic as that, because I think that's I think what we want to take, because I think that's where it is. We want to take a set of problems that people want to put in this domain and work out what the shape of putting them in this domain means, and then the kind of way I read the search thing in more generically is what are we going to have to do to realize that, other than just the data mapping piece. Is there's also these pieces around discovery and metadata querying and the other pieces that will fall out of that.
Is this 3 points now in the goals? Then we have the initial inquiry, we have the development of the specification or the data model, which would include, I think, the query parameters, and then the actual development of the tooling. Are those the 3 phases or 3 goals we're talking about, or does that distill your feedback?
Yeah, I think that would be, something along those lines would be fine. I'm just thinking out loud, but I think something along, if anyone's got other ideas, but I think, something.
And then you'd move like the gather existing schemas used via OCR artifact. Maybe that's an activity, not a goal.
Well, I kind of felt that it's understanding the state. Yeah, there's understanding the state of what's real. There's understanding the state of what people desire.
Right.
Then there's synthesizing those together into a scope that that's manageable, and then there's implementing some stuff around that.
Right. Like the way I see it, I guess maybe it's not the same as you, but the way I see it is the goal is understanding and the activity is the lit review. Right. Like going through and
sure. Yeah. That's Yeah.
what's going on. And then from that you gain understanding, and that's the goal. You've achieved the goal as a result.
Yeah.
If you happen to achieve the goal some other way by like consulting an oracle or something and getting the answer, then awesome. You save yourself the lit review.
I see this as if we're talking about as if the working group is the user, then we would have or the subject of the story. Then we would have the user group, or the working group needs to understand, the working group needs to enable, and then the working group needs to help provide something that uses that enablement, or that would make use of that enablement. So I think using I think that's helpful, and then I agree that we could put in under the activities the actual act of some of those things. Okay. Brandon, are you going into something else on the feedback, or was it related to the current conversation?
I just hit submit on it. So
Okay.
feel free to look at and say, oh, heck no, or take it as is. Either way, doesn't matter to me. I just wanted to get something spitballed up there for people to look at.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, while you were talking, I also put 3 lines. What you were saying, Alex, the 3, I think, goals, that the concrete goals, I tried to make them into what and why statements. So maybe that helps them too. I'll try to put them in the issue later today.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I just framing the working group as the subject, and then the need of the working group, and then what you said. So yes, okay. So I think if we're comfortable, if the group has a comfortability around this approach with these 3 goals that go into the understanding, the enablement, and then the go into the actual action of the use of that. Then we had in the agenda one more thing that was where is this work going to reside? I'm actually very interested in what Ram was talking about last session, where we start getting user issues submitted to us, stating their use cases or needs or struggles or whatever those issues would convey. We would need a repository to hold that. I think that repository would also be purposed for the specification development and maybe any reference implementation of that, and also to collect the schemas and other use cases.
Yeah. Looking at some of the user stories you've got now, when I was at Open Source Summit, there was a specific request for, we need to be able to discover by label. And so that was something they said, hey, the refers API just doesn't help me because I'm looking for everything in a repository that has a specific label on it. And maybe annotation would have been the better word in that case for what they were doing. But yeah, you kind of capture that here. I've heard it before. So there's some good stuff coming out of this.
Yeah, I can second that from my use case.
Awesome. Thank you.
Going back to what you were saying, Alex, though, you want to open a forum. Is that okay if I'm?
Yeah, maybe I don't know if we do this in Slack. I don't feel comfortable provisioning that space until the charter's been accepted, because then it seems like we put the cart before the horse. Maybe I don't know if that's rational, or maybe we go create things without having an official charter backing us. But I would like the group to keep that in mind. I wish Steve was here because I have a certain discomfort with this living in Oris at this point because of the relationship, some of the dynamics between them and OCI and otherwise. But I would just like to continue, just everybody keeping that in mind. Where is this going to live? And if anybody has any proposals, come back to the next session.
We had some discussions at KubeCon at the TSE session there about just having repos for tags so that they could put things in them where the things were clearly owned by the CNCF but didn't actually need to be projects per se. And I still think that makes sense. And because there's been a bunch of things that have ended up just being in slightly random repos without clear CNCF ownership, even though they're executed like in the name of CNCF entities like tags, and it's kind of weird that there isn't. And so I think that, I think that's still a potential option, is that we just try and get an official tag app delivery repo or like a working group repo and just use that for now.
We
I
have
think
a tag repo, but I think what Alex and the team here are kind of saying is like that repo is pretty cluttered at this point. Between
so effectively, either moving it so the tags have orgs and they can create more repos, or we have a kind of naming and management and thing where we can just create some more stuff, but as separate. But I think just moving all of everything to orgs would be a kind of clean solution.
That would be nice, because that would give us flexibility. Like now I'm thinking like, whoa, there's just one repo, it's got to be really official. But if it was an org, we would have more flexibility to let's spin up this repo and see where it goes and do an experiment here. That would be cool. I brought this up in the last talk meeting that we wanted to, and there was a little bit of like, oh, I don't know if we can get you a repo. So I was looking to you, Justin.
Yeah, it's come up again. I think we need to. I'll bring it up again because I think it's a general problem that a lot of people have things that don't have proper homes.
We would take Potato Head probably back into our thing too, and maybe create a repo for platforms. Like we're all in one place. So
where is Potato Head now?
It's in its own org called Potato Head.
But it's not. Oh yeah, because I think that was. So, but it's not officially a. It's not officially a sandbox project.
No, it's just managed by the tag. We still, use it and talk about it, and I see it pop up on LinkedIn. Sometimes I scroll through and I see Potato Head in a demo, so it's used.
But it's just a question of like, officially, what is it? Like, and officially, does the CNCF feel like legally? Do their lawyers understand that they potentially own it? And those kinds of questions, which are important for the organization, which we need to.
We just went over time, but so maybe my question could be rephrased then, Justin. Is this something that we can keep checking back with you on then and see? Talk about where this repo should just live.
You could check with me too. Justin, you could check with him too, okay. But I will help filter if you want to some degree.
Yeah, preference. Whoever wants to own that. Just something we can just keep drumming, just keep pressing on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. This was a very far-reaching, however, I think very productive meeting, and I appreciate everybody's engagement and participation here.
Thank you, Alex.
Take care, y'all.
Thank you.